Good? We're awake? I always get really tired after lunch, so I'll try to make this fun. So today I'm going to talk about bravery. To preface that, this is actually the first time that I'm sharing information about my own career journey. I usually talk about the industry and about living here and just kind of general business knowledge. So I feel a little bit brave because I've never kind of opened up about this stuff in a forum like this. So bear with me if I get a little nervous. So I grew up in a little town in Massachusetts called Hanson. It's kind of like, even people in Massachusetts are like, where are you from? It's on the pathway to the Cape if you're going to Boston. So most people are just like, it's your average nothing suburban town, but that's actually not true. It's the original home of Ocean Spray. You guys, we invented cranberry sauce. That's like amazing. So I had no idea growing up that my town was so entrepreneurial. I thought it was just kind of a boring town that a train went through at one time, and some people were like, all right, we'll live here. So I've actually used this a little bit in my own journey because, entrepreneurs can kind of come from anywhere. And I also want to point out, and I don't know any facts behind this, I found a researcher who knows a lot about cranberries. He saw me posting about it on Facebook earlier this week. So he's actually going to give me the report so I can learn who specifically invented cranberry sauce, because at the time that cranberry sauce was invented, it was mostly women in the kitchens. So I really want to find out, did all of these men take credit for inventing, the world's most amazing food products? I like cranberry sauce, so if you hadn't noticed. So I went to school, so I grew up in this small town, and I always had an interest in animals. I was always babysitting people's dogs. And so when I was deciding on what high school I was going to go to, I really wanted my parents to send me to this agricultural high school so that I could get to know veterinary medicine. So I was going to be a veterinarian. First I was going to be a nun, and then I was kind of doesn't fit my personality. So I was gonna be a veterinarian. So I actually went to school. Let's talk about brave, bringing up pictures from junior prom. So I went to Norfolk Aggie. It's a school dedicated to businesses and agriculture. So I learned a lot of pre-veterinary studies there. And I put the cow picture in there because there are two things about me in high school that are kind of funny. One, I was the president of the kennel club, and the way I got that was no one else wanted to do a speech. So, and I was looking to build my resume because I knew my track was going to go into Purdue or something, or Tufts for veterinary school. So I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be really great to have president of the kennel club on my resume. So taking a chance to do the speech, it was the first speech I think I've ever given. I was the kennel club president. I was fairly okay at it. And also, one of the other things in high school that was really interesting is I actually won first place in fitting. So for those of you who don't know anything about, somebody knows about cows. So fitting is when you basically wash a cow and you get awarded for your ability to properly wash a cow. So anyone, maybe that's my next career move. If anyone needs their cows washed, I'm your girl. So that was the track I was going into, and I continued into UMass as a veterinary student, and I really loved it. I was around really, really, really smart people that were really, really, really much smarter than me, and I was really having a hard time keeping up with the classes. I wanted to go out to the parties, and these people were like, no, we have to study, it's Friday, we have a test on Monday, and I was like, I don't know if this is something I can do, I want to go to that party. So my focuses were a little bit different, but then also I developed a number of allergies, so my career as a veterinarian was probably not going to happen. So I went from wrangling cattle to wrangling cats, as they say, right? Like PR is about wrangling cats. It's getting a lot of people going in 20 billion different directions to follow what you do. And so I moved from more of like a dirt and boots kind of environment to a very prestigious environment. I was an event staffer, so I basically like took your ticket when you came into the venue. But my bosses started to notice that when they put me in the VIP section, we were the #1 basketball school at the time, so it was like a big deal. We had a lot of dignitaries coming. A lot of celebrities who were on tour would come through our venue. And they noticed that I actually dealt with VIPs with ease. It was just very natural for me. And they felt comfortable around me, and I felt comfortable around them. So I was moved into a PR position. So I went from being an event staffer to an event manager to the building's PR person. And I wanted to get to know marketing because, you know, like that was the one thing I just didn't know. I could talk to people, but I didn't know how to market to people. So I started taking up tasks from the marketing director. And then when I was actually graduating, so I was pretty much working full-time before I graduated college because I really loved this job. I met a lot of like rock stars. It was amazing. It was so cool. Gave my sister concert tickets. So, but when I was graduating, there wasn't really a full-time job. But the assistant to the executive director was leaving. And I had zero interest in being an assistant because I had done a lot of things above an assistant level position at the venue already. So they were trying to talk me into taking this job. They're like, this is the only job available, you should take it. So I said, okay, well, I'll take the job. You know, I'll incorporate the administrative tasks into my job, but I will not be your assistant. You know, like I've been doing really big things at this venue. I want to learn how to book talent and run a venue. So we agreed that I was going to come in as a booking coordinator. And that was one of the first lessons in my career. So I discovered in that moment that I'm a girl Friday, right? Like I was one of the guys, I could hang with them, they would like give me a lot of tasks to do, and I would do them really well, and then we would talk about how their team did these tasks, and I was like, these people are getting like credit for the work that I'm doing building their reputation. And I was like, all right, so I'm the girl Friday. Not something I really wanted to be. I didn't want to have someone else being celebrated for the really hard work that I was doing. So my boss at that time ended up going to LA. I was also actually going to go to LA because my boyfriend at the time had gotten a job out there. We ended up breaking up before I moved out there, but it was the new, so I was made the executive director of the building actually when he left as the interim director. At 23 years old, I was the youngest executive director of a building of that size. It was a 10,000-seat concert venue. If I had accepted the assistant position, I never would have been given the executive director position. So titles sometimes early in your career can be significant. So I had met all of these celebrities, right? So I had a pretty decent ego at 23. I was like, I could walk into a restaurant, and people wanted tickets to things, so sometimes I never saw a bill. And you know, I was kind of a big man on campus thing, so I had an ego to match that. And so I was like, I'm so done with this place. I'm gonna go to LA. And I, like boyfriend or not, whatever, I do not need that guy. I was like, I'm just gonna own the music industry. So this is me, not really, but essentially. I packed up my Jetta because I'm very cliche, and because I had a Jetta, like every you know, we just had Jettas at the time. So anything that fit came with me, anything didn't. And halfway through my journey to Los Angeles, I got a phone call. And it was a promoter that I had worked with in Massachusetts who knew an agent in Los Angeles who knew a manager in Beverly Hills who needed a tour publicist. So because I had maintained those relationships, I had a job before I even set foot in LA. And like I was going out there frightened out of my mind. I was like, this is the first time I've never had a job, like in my young career. So it was a really kind of interesting moment. I took a chance on myself. I was like, you're gonna be fine. And I used my relationships to get kind of a career-defining role. where I ended up working with a lot of artists. Some of you probably won't recognize any of these artists. In some cases, especially with the Marshall Tucker Band, like these are bands from the 70s and early 80s. I didn't know them either. But they are like still making a ton of money in touring and royalties. So I learned a lot working with those artists. You know, a lot of my friends were working on really cool bands, and they were making like next to nothing, like living 10 people in a room just so they could work in the music industry. And I had like a comfy salary, and I was working with artists who had already been on either side of the career curve. So I really did learn a lot from them. It was a really good experience. I think like working with the Flaming Lips in particularly was kind of, does anyone know the Flaming Lips in here? Yeah, okay. So, and the Fix, I still talk to them. They're amazing people. So, but then I was, you know, it put me in a position where I was like, I know that I can manage bands. So I started off at this company as a tour publicist, but the guy who owned it owned 5 different companies. By the time I left that company 4 years later, I was the director of artist relations, and I was running all of his companies. But I learned a valuable lesson from him. These are some of the other artists I worked with later. I learned a valuable lesson from him too, because when I went in there, I was one of 2 women in the office. The other woman was the bookkeeper. His assistant was a man. But for some reason, whenever something happened that required some sort of logistical thought or, you know, admin, I was the one who was asked to do it. And I couldn't understand that because I was not the assistant. And I was like, what am I conveying to people that would make them think that like I should spend my time on paperwork rather than on like getting press for their bands? And I noticed that when I was introduced by like the other agents or the managers, they're like, this is Paula, she's just a girl in our office. And so I actually, after a while, started correcting them. I was like, actually, I'm the director of artist relations. If you are doing business with us, I'm the person you'll be doing business with. So I learned a valuable lesson about that too, is like, you know, like not, it's okay to say, no, I'm not gonna get the coffee in order to kind of take control of your career. So the other lesson I learned was that I was a background person, right? Like I was the one who, you know, the stagehand, right? I really like being the stagehand, but I don't like being the stagehand and then having somebody else being acknowledged for that work that I do. So that's me. So one of the things that I learned to do, and you're gonna see a really funny picture up here in a minute, and I'll explain that after, is I actually started putting myself in the picture, right? It's like, I belong here. I'm doing this is my moment. The interesting thing about that bottom picture that I'm in is my boyfriend at the time is the guy right there. His name's Greg Marks. He's a director and a writer. He's not the one that pulled me into that picture. Colin Hanks pulled me into that picture because he saw Iron Man push me over on the carpet. So he was just like, that was really rude. You need to be in this picture. You're part of this production. Boyfriend or not, you've lent significantly to this film. So it was a really kind of compelling moment. I was like, yeah, you know what, he's right. So the other thing I learned in this moment was that if you change career paths or you've gained a skill set, you can still utilize that skill set. I can't tell you how proud I was the moment I called my mother and I said, you know how I studied veterinary medicine for 6 years? I finally got to use all of that veterinary studies because I ended up working on an art project about secret agent and superhero cows, as one does. So I actually utilized, when we were building the marketing program around that book and art exhibition, I didn't have to ask anyone cow facts. I just knew them. In fact, the photographer was like, how do you know that this is true? I'm like, trust me, dude, it's true. And then he actually looked up to see if like the cow facts that because I don't know if you know this, but cows have actually contributed to photography for a number of years because the cellulose or the gloss that's used on photography and film back in the day was actually made out of hooves. So I was showing how digital photography is actually vegan in a lot of ways. It was maybe a stretch, but it was a fun project to work on. So then the next step was, I worked in the music industry at a time of digital transition when we were going to MP3s. I worked in film at a time where, people were putting film online and downloading them, like Napster, things like that. And I really discovered that I love technology. So I looked at technology, I was like, wait, maybe I'm a total geek after all, and I can really work in the tech industry. So I started looking for roles in the tech industry, and a lot of my friends from the creative industries was like, you can't do that. You can't just change career. I'm like, well, dude, I was like a veterinary medicine student, and I graduated with a creative writing degree. I'm pretty sure that going from art and music to tech is not that hard. So in comes The Apprentice. I was not on The Apprentice. I'll get to that in a minute. My sister, who, she's my big sister, so she called me one day and she goes, Paula, I'm flying you to Boston, where I'm originally from. I was like, why? And she's like, well, The Apprentice is holding auditions, and I think you would be perfect for it. And she's like, we have to go, you have to do this. And I was like, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm not what are you talking about? And also Trump, and unbeknownst to her, I had actually worked on an event when I was working with some of those older bands. I'd worked on an event, he used to have this thing called the Miss Trump USA pageant. And after working that event, I never wanted to be around anyone related to Trump ever again. As we've now learned in the media, strange things happen at Trump events. So while that band was amazing, I just saw things I just didn't really respect, so I just never wanted to work any of his events again. So here she is telling me, yeah, you have to go on a show with Trump, and I was like, I'm not sure that's really what I want to do. So I totally flubbed the interview, but I didn't want to tell my sister that I didn't want to be there. But in line, there was this kind of crazy character, and this guy, Danny, and he's just started talking to us randomly. And it turns out that he had a music technology company based in Boston and Los Angeles, that he was looking for somebody who had contacts in publishing that could work with him for business development. And also, he found out I was a PR person, so he actually ended up on The Apprentice. So I actually ended up working for his company until he was on the third season. He made it to the third episode, and then all of us kind of got into this pattern of being his personal PR team, which is not what I signed up for. So I actually ended up leaving that company. But it also was the first time that I could actually, in my career, say, I've worked in the arts and entertainment sector, and I know how it matches with technology. So I actually started a new career path as a result of that. Tag World was eventually sold to MTV. I was the fourth publicist or director of PR in a 6-month period. I only lasted 6 months, but I lasted longer than any of my colleagues there. And I ended up getting Tag World into Fast Company and Wall Street Journal and Billboard magazine. Really, really, really successful. But when I actually got to my first day of my job, I was meeting my bosses at the airport. We were going to this big tech event, and he goes, you get me Walt Mossberg, or you could say goodbye. Walt Mossberg at the time was one of the biggest tech journalists in the United States. So I was like, all right, I'll try. So I was under the gun. I was terrified. I just really wanted to prove that I could do this. It was the first time I was the actual director of PR anywhere, even though I had done a lot of PR functions before. So as it turns out, I had a lot of success. I delivered Walt Mossberg. He didn't care about the product, but that wasn't my problem. So it actually ended up deepening my career track into tech. So what are the lessons that I learned out of those two experiences? One, that I was working around a lot of entrepreneurs. They were very entrepreneurial. All of the traits that I had that didn't mesh well with corporate environments were actually entrepreneurial skills, like having authority over your realm and having a clear vision for how you wanted to do things. So I decided I had made enough PR contacts and had done I was suddenly really well known, especially after working at Tag World. But I wanted to do things my own way, and I couldn't figure out what to do. My biggest fear actually was not having a paycheck. So I was out at a gig, because I was always around bands, and my friend Kamran V said to me, he's like, so what are you going to do next? I'm like, well, I really want to start my own PR firm. And I was like, but I'm really afraid of not having a paycheck. And he's like, well, what if they miss payroll? Then you don't have a paycheck. I was like, well, that's true. And he's like, what's the worst that can happen, Gould? you fail at starting your own company and you go and get another job. And literally, I started my PR firm the next day. This is in 2007. So it's called PEG PR because my name is Paula Elizabeth Gould. PEG is also the nickname of my grandmother, so it has special meaning to me. So I focused my PR firm on art and tech. And I got to work on some really amazing projects. The Simpsons episode was like, it was an artist that I worked with named Robbie Cannell. He's really well known in the political art circles. I was just so proud of him when he ended up on The Apprentice, on The Simpsons. One of the last projects that I did on the West Coast was a Battlestar Galactica exhibition, which was like, it was a crazy event. I'll tell you over beer sometime. But I also got to work on things like the Emmys wanted to do business with online content creators. I knew all of the online content creators, so I was valuable to them. So as a small little firm, with just me and a couple of part-time people, I actually had a really significant reach. But I also got to work on back-end technologies. The key here is that I was able to do art and technology at the same time. So you probably won't know a lot of these companies, except for maybe Witty, because it's Women in Technology International. It's a really well-known organization. And I worked with them for several years and curated their events. But music.com, you obviously probably recognize. But it was really great. And starting my own company, I was able to actually work on music, film, art, advertising, like all of the things that are listed here. So somebody had said, once told me that I can't go do this industry because I'm not from that industry. And then I started my own company, and I learned all kinds of different industries because really, entrepreneurs are creative people, just like artists are. They just express their creativity in a different way. I also got to work on some really amazing nonprofit events. This one in the center, kind of quasi-red carpet. First of all, tech companies on the West Coast have a red carpet for everything. It was just like a thing. But I also got to work with Empower Her Institute, and later I joined their board, where we went into areas that were disadvantaged, went into charter schools there, and taught entrepreneurship to the kids. So one of my favorite and most rewarding moments was sitting in this classroom with these kids, and they were telling me about ideas they had, and watching their faces light up when they realized that those ideas had value, right? Like this one kid, he had an idea for T-shirts that he wanted to make from his art, and I gave him like a zillion different examples of different designers who had art that they turned into fashion. So this other thing right here, that was a cross-country trip that I did with a lot of specialized motor vehicle enthusiasts, and we drove cross-country to bring awareness to missing children. It was like a crazy, fun, and emotional trip. And then this cause, It's My Birthday, is actually a girlfriend of mine, Sloan Davidson. She actually runs a program for refugees in the States now. But she decided that she wanted to do something for her birthday. So she came up with this idea of doing a tour, and it's cause It's My Birthday. So she went on this tour, had parties, people paid tickets to go to her party, and the proceeds from those tickets bought malaria nets for various regions in Africa. So it's just an example of how you can do anything with anything, right? Like if you really think about it. So I was doing really well in business. I decided to reward myself. I had friends that would come to Iceland every year for New Year's because it's a time when we could really let our hair down. And they had been trying to get me to go. I was like, I moved to Los Angeles to get away from Boston winters. Why would I ever in a million years go to Iceland on New Year's, no less? I was like, can't we just go to like St. Thomas? So I surprised them and I joined them. And this was a really, well, obviously now I'm still here, but a monumental trip for me because when I landed here for the first time in 10 years, my feet hit the ground when I got to Keflavik, and I felt roots grow. Like I just felt home. And it was a really emotional experience for me. This is a picture that I took down at what's the beach across from Yokosuka? It's like the Black Beach. I mean, I now know that there's like all black beaches, but like at the time it was the Black Beach. So I was taking pictures of the sculptures that the ice were creating. And this one stood out for me because it reminded me of Phantom of the Opera, right? Does it not look like a mask to you? Right. That's really a significant moment when I clicked this button. So I came back with that same group of friends in the following year, in 2009, 2010. And I met Grimur. So you guys get the joke, right? Like masks. Okay. So I was out at a bar one night, Bacchus. I don't know if any of you guys remember that. It was where Hura is now. And I was at the bar, and it was my turn to buy a round of drinks, and the bartender apparently wasn't supposed to be working that night, and he was high, and he bit my hand. No joke. And I was like, oh my God, I want to hit this guy, but I'm in a foreign country. What if I end up in a dungeon somewhere and it's cold? How do I handle this situation? So I looked around me to find if anyone had just seen this crazy thing happen where I have teeth marks in my hand. And so I elbowed the guy next to me, and I was like, did you see that? And he's like, no, see what? I was like, the dude just bit me. I'm just trying to buy beer. Like, what is this place? That guy is now my husband. So we joke that maybe he paid the guy to bite my hand or something. So I went home, and I'm always somebody, like, I was going to move to Los Angeles originally to be with a boyfriend, and then that didn't work out, and I was just like, oh, well, I'm going to go to Los Angeles anyway. So I had vowed to myself that I was never going to do anything like that for a man ever again. And since I'm standing here, you know that I went back on my word for myself. So we met, and he was amazing, and I was like a child. I mean, like, I'm not somebody who swoons. And I went to the Consumer Electronics Show directly from Iceland, and I was showing people this picture, and I'm like, I met the hottest guy in Iceland, and I don't know where this is going, but I am so in love with this guy, and I don't know what to do. And my friends were like, what happened to you when you were over there? And so he said, like, hey, I'd really like to see you again. And like, I've been dating in Los Angeles for 10 years. I've heard that before, right? Like, I'd love to see you again too. Yeah. He actually meant it. So like, the defining difference between my husband and the guys that I was dating in Los Angeles is he said the things that you want to hear, but he actually meant the things that you wanted to hear. So he swept me off my feet. I showed him this, by the way, and he's horrified that I'm sharing this with you. I was like, it's funny. He's like, it's not really that funny. I was like, no, dude, it's like so funny. So everyone's laughing. I was right. Anyway, so he swept me off my feet. He moved out to Los Angeles. Well, not moved out. He came to visit, right, on the 3-month visa kind of thing. And it was so great because the relationship had teeth. And when he was going back after Christmas, he had to return to his job. I was devastated for the first time in my whole life. So we ended up deciding to get married 1.5 years later. And he's like, yeah, so I tried living in Los Angeles. What do you say you try, like, Iceland for the summer? He's so cunning. Like, he knew that if he said the summer, I'd be okay with it. And so I expected that we'd be here for 3 months and that I would move back to Boston, where I'm from. And 7 years later, I'm standing in front of a crowd of women, talking to them about my new relationship that's now 8 years old. So the great thing about that story about our relationship is all of my friends, especially my single friends in LA, were like, oh my God, that's such a beautiful love story, and except for the hand-biting part. And so one of my girlfriends was handling some of the marketing efforts for the Walter Mitty marketing campaign. So our story was actually included in the marketing campaign, and skillfully, I was working for Green Cloud at the time, and we positioned it that I was here saving the world through green energy. So I was able to play it into the company as well. So it's kind of a fun little thing. But the interesting thing about going into work with Green Cloud was, as you'll recall, when I met my husband, I was running my own PR shop. So when we got married, I was still running that PR shop and continued to do that a year after we were married. But then I realized I was traveling every 6 weeks to go back to Los Angeles to deal with my clients. And I was gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and that's no way to start a marriage. And I had committed to being here. Like, I was physically committed to being here. I'd moved my stuff over here, but I wasn't mentally committed to being here. So the next big thing that I did was put my company down. The company that I was so afraid to start. 5 years later, I put it down. And I was so terrified. I got a job like 2 days later. But at the time, I didn't know that, and I was really, really terrified. And there was the one thing that I had learned from the conversation I had with Kamran V about, like, what's the worst that can happen? You'll fail and go get a job. So I was like, all right, so what's the worst that can happen? I fail getting a job, and I'll start my own company. So it worked both ways. So since I've been here, I've worked on or with a number of really compelling organizations and companies. I've mentored, I've been on the board, I've had 2 exits, I'm active in the community. I started another organization called Women Tech Iceland, which at the moment is just a Facebook group, to bring all of the different groups of women in technology together here and plug them into the outside world. So it's been really great, but the interesting thing is, since I've been here, I've also worked on all of these things, right? So like, if there's ever a place where you can wear a gazillion different hats, I mean, it's here, right? Everyone does something different the next time they do something. So working in venture capital, I got to work across 16 different industries. You know, like, I didn't know anything about fish processing, and now I do. Thank you, Velka. So it's been a really great ride to be here. But I've also run into different situations that I've run into before. Like, you can't do that. Like, who do you think you are? And you have a lot of nerve. And where early in my career, I would take those kind of conversations and be like, oh my God, who do I think I am? Like when I was moving to Los Angeles, and I was like when I say I had an ego, I'm not kidding. It's just like, obviously, everyone's going to want to work with me. And then that was just reinforced because I had a job before I actually got there. But when people would say those things to me, it chipped away at me. But now, you know, I'm 42 years old. I'm 20 years into my career. When somebody says, like, you can't do that, I'm like, right, watch me. And then it's like, you have a lot of nerve. I'm like, I do. I do have a lot of nerve. And that's why I get things done. And then, like, who do you think you are? I'm Paula Gould. This is what I do, right? So people wonder, like, where do you get that attitude from? Because, I mean, even when I was younger, when it would chip away at me, I still did it anyway. I was still like, I can do this, like, show them, right? And I actually listened more to the people who were like, you can do this. And I was like, yeah. So it's good to, like, have role models around you. So, you know, when people ask me, like, who I am and where I'm from, this picture comes up. Do you see that woman on the top of that ladder painting her own house? That's my grandmother. She's in her 70s in this picture. This is the picture on my bureau at my parents' house. Every time, I was just home 2 weeks ago speaking at my alma mater. It makes me smile so much because this is a woman who was tenacious, who was criticized for being tenacious, and she just did not give a damn. She just did it anyway. So that's the kind of environment I grew up. That's just my dad's side of the family. Then there's my grandmother. My grandmother actually didn't get married until she was 30. She spent an entire decade being pregnant. I don't know how she did that. I had 2 kids, and I was like, I'm done. And thank you to all of the Lake Scully teachers, because really, I don't know how you handle that many kids at once. I just can't. I have really amazing children, but I mean, whoa. So this is my grandmother. I didn't discover until after she passed away that she was actually a court stenographer. She gave up her career as a court stenographer to get married and have a decade worth of babies. And like literally, she had 8 babies. Like she had like almost 1 a year. And she would go on ski trips. And she was just like living her life. And I regret that she passed in 2009. I regret that I didn't get to talk to her about those stories. But let me tell you, like whether she was in the business realm or not, this woman owned her kingdom. You did not do anything without the rule of the matriarch, and she was the matriarch. And I mean, she was just an amazing, amazing woman. So I had these 2 very powerful women on either side of me, and the women that they had were the same way. And then I moved to a neighborhood when I was like 1. Okay, so my parents moved to a neighborhood. And my next door neighbor was somebody who didn't take typing class in high school, which you were supposed to do, because she was not going to be a secretary to some man, right? So I was like, this is the environment I grew up in. So when you wonder where I get my, like, you know, my bravery or my courage or my tenacity or my, you know, audaciousness from, can go back to these women. The other thing that my grandmother on my mom's side, the one that was the court stenographer, taught me was squad goals. So, like, this is just a third of my family, right? This is from this summer. We have a family wiffle ball tournament every year. There's a lot of us. I'm friends with my cousins. I'm friends with my first cousins, my second cousins, my third cousins, their kids. We roll deep. And the importance of that is knowing that while you can do things on your own and step up and do them, you can't do those things alone. So I have developed a squad here that I just love, as some of you are in here. And you've been invaluable to me as I've moved here as an immigrant. And while I'm a more privileged immigrant because I came in here as an executive, I still run into immigrant issues once in a while. And having a network here, that was one of the first things I focused on, was just really getting to know both women and men here that I could relate to and share with. So what have I learned? Well, I just told you some of the things, but for you, I did bullet points. So I learned all of these things, and probably a lot more. It's really, really important to take chances on yourself. I just can't emphasize that enough. It's so scary. If you take a chance on yourself and it doesn't work out, take another chance on yourself, because you've learned something from the one that didn't work out. You learn quickly what you know and what you don't know, and that's a hard lesson. I'm still learning those lessons. I will for the rest of my life, but I also know what skills I can actually acquire. And a lot of the things that we don't know, it's not brain science or brain surgery, and you can learn that too if you want. Like, it's just something that you can do. Your experience matters, it's valuable. Even if you had a failed experience, that experience has made you a stronger person, a better person, hopefully a more well-rounded person. So understand the value in that. Some people won't see that value. This happens all the time. I have these things happen all the time. At this point in my career, or in my life in general, while it hurts, it doesn't own me anymore. So you can either prove them wrong quickly or just walk away. You have to decide how much energy you want to put into another person who doesn't see your value. But you also have to show people your value. It's a really big world. I know that's hard to say, and most of you have internationally facing businesses now, so you know it's a really big world. Most of you go to college outside of Iceland at some point. Find your niche. If it doesn't work here, that doesn't mean it's not going to work somewhere else, right? But use an environment where you can really develop something that's really unique and exploit that, right? Like, Green Cloud was a cloud computing company. We took a green ocean strategy. That's how we got a footing in the world. That's why we had a brand identity, is because no one else was talking about the energy supply chain that went into cloud computing. And we exploited that, and quite well, obviously. So, there's compromise in your career path. I did not expect to be living in Iceland. I made a personal compromise because I valued the relationship that I was developing with my husband. And so I was like, I'll just figure it out. I've done really well here. I don't know what's next for us, if we're always going to be in Iceland, but you do have to make compromises. Sometimes I don't get the title that I want when I go into a company, but it doesn't matter if it's a really great company. I know that I'm going to show my value there. Being an immigrant is hard, and I say that with a hint of kind of guilt, because I'm not a typical immigrant. I was already well into my career before I moved here. I knew that I could lend value to this community. I have a skill set. So I was always really empathetic to the immigrant conundrum in the States, because we have lots of immigrants in the States. But now I understand it more deeply, and so I found myself to be a lot more empathetic and also a lot more open to talking to people about when I feel like I've been judged as an immigrant. Periodically reflect on your accomplishments. If you speak at events, you have to talk about your career. It's a really great opportunity to go back and be like, wow, I did some really amazing things, right? Like, I had forgotten about half of the clients I had worked on at my PR firm. I was like, oh yeah, the Rihanna thing, that was amazing. I literally, how do you forget about something like that? I forgot about it. And then you can't do it alone. I said that earlier. Have empathy, bring people in, take chances on other people. because it makes you a better person, it makes your product better. And if that person that you took a chance on doesn't work out, don't not take a chance on somebody else, or don't not take another chance on that person if they have other values. So my key takeaways is you can do that. You have a lot of nerve, and this is who you are right now. This might not be who you are later, but there's value in who you are. So utilize that. One of the things that I've been really focused on lately is water. If you think about the way water flows, you have a rock, right? The rock gets in the path of water. The water finds another path. It creates another path for itself. So I want you to remember that even if you're running into career hurdles, always think that, just envision yourself as water and find another path. There's always another way. So it might not be what you perceived it should be, but you can always find another way. So I'll just close on being brave. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. This is very inspiring. We don't have a lot of time, but maybe we'll have 1 or 2 questions. So ef þið eru með einhverjar spurningar úr sal, þá má ég endilega fara inn í forritið. Það komið þarna. We have the first question. Yeah, here.
How can Iceland attract more talent like yourself to move here? Find other Greemers who... I have a lot of girlfriends that are still single. No, I'm kidding. That's actually a real topic of discussion, especially since Icelandic companies are becoming more international, or have to be more international, and are born global. Incentivize them in some way, and do they have to move here, right? Like most of you, when you start your companies, as you start your marketing and sales markets, your customer markets are not here in Iceland usually. So why not build the sales and marketing team in the market that you're growing, right, customers? From a technical perspective, because most companies that have tech background need developers here. That's true to a point. Fly them in every once in a while, right? I mean, it was just lucky that I happened to meet my husband and come here. But there's a lot of talent everywhere. There's a lot of talent here. A lot of people are underutilized here. I have a particular thing about how companies only have 1 marketing person. That blows my mind. And usually that person is also the salesperson and HR person. No more of that. But I think that if you show the value of the company, then people are generally willing to move or be flexible in how you can work with them, like meet them halfway. What's the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome in your career? There is a lot. I think actually my biggest obstacle is myself. There was a time, like it hurts me when people question my value. And so I've had to learn over the years how to just show the value, right? So it's like, if somebody, when I was younger, would tell me, you know, we're so much better at this, or you're so much, you know, like, you can't do this. While I have a lot of nerve, it still hurts. So you just have to absorb the hurt and be like, well, this is who I am, and this is what I do. And frankly, if you can't join them, beat them, right? That's the biggest thing. Yeah, Do you think a remote CMO for a mostly Iceland-based company works? Yes, I do. I'm lucky enough to be a CMO here, but I tell you, in almost every single company that I talk to or go into or mentor, like, I always expect that my role is going to move somewhere, right? Because you need to be in the markets that you're growing in. And you can have remote employees. People do it everywhere. Iceland is not unique in that way. In fact, it is unique because it's on a rock. Like, you are remote. Like, like everyone else has an advantage because they're in their customer markets. You guys have to fly to your customer market. Like that, you know, so in theory, you would think that you would understand remoteness. But yeah, I do think it can work. You just have to make it work.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. Þá komið að næsta góða gesti hjá okkur og það hún